Coming to you from Brick House in downtown Brooklyn, this is 112BK. On the show today, talking about guns and gun violence, again. A look at NYCHA with the City Council's Public Housing Chair, and a Myrtle Avenue Artwalk. Hi, and thanks for joining us. I'm Ashley Ford, and today feels different. How could you not be inspired by these kids in Tallahassee, in DC, at the CNN Town Hall, staging walkouts across the country? How could you not think this is the moment when the conversation on guns might shift? Well, you could be a cynic who thinks the NRA won't back down, and that if they won't, neither will the villainous Congress members whose pockets they line. You might consider that the NRA will stay predictably silent for a bit, let its money do the talking, and maybe back some watered-down non-solution solution and implicate everything except guns in these latest deaths. You might also watch AR-15 sales spike in parts of Florida, gun manufacturers' stocks rise, and conservative wingnuts smear the teenage survivors who just watched their classmates get gunned down, calling them shills for the left's so-called quote-unquote obsession with erasing the Second Amendment. There's a cold place in hell for the individuals peddling that untruth. But I side with the hopeful. And I believe that this activated army can be the catalyst we so desperately need. Theirs is a strong story, and they make a powerful bloc, soon to be a voting bloc. That's right. These kids are 16 and 17, and although they won't be voting in the midterms, they will be voting in 2020, and I'm betting they'll remember this. So to Marco Rubio and others who plan on letting the clock run out on this moment of outrage, you might soon be out of a job. On the show today, more about guns, specifically about how politicians link guns to mental illness in order to avoid doing their jobs, a conversation with City Council member Alicka Ampry-Samuel about racial and economic justice, and a Myrtle Avenue Art Walk for Black History Month. But first, these things. Swastikas were etched into the sides of two vehicles in the predominantly Jewish neighborhood of Borough Park on Wednesday. The NYPD's Hate Crimes Task Force is investigating the incident, but does it really matter whether it was perpetrated by hate-filled anti-Semites or idiotic kids? It just needs to stop. Either way. A not very good Brooklyn bank robber left two banks empty-handed, according to the NYPD. On two separate days this week, the would-be crook passed handwritten notes demanding cash to two bank tellers, who apparently just said no and walked away. The forlorn man left both banks without raising a fuss or, more importantly, a gun. I think he needs to find another job, but the police may find him first. A picture of his face is all over the place, including here. Coming up, our first conversation. Last Wednesday, a teenager killed 17 of his former classmates and teachers at a high school in Florida with an AR-15 assault rifle. Too soon? Too late? Too hard to talk about efforts to stop these tragedies from happening? Our next guest wants to make sure we talk the right way about how to stop these tragedies from happening. And making it about mental health is not the right way. In fact, he says, it only pushes us further from real solutions. To tell us about this, we welcome back to the show author, Vanderbilt professor of Sociology and Psychiatry, and Brooklynite, Jonathan Metzl. Jonathan, thank you for coming back.
Thanks so much for having me. It's nice to be back.
So Jonathan, on the one hand, it's great to see you. On the other hand, it sucks to have you back to talk about this stuff. I wish we never had to talk about it again, but not anytime soon, right? Post-mass shooting, can you talk to me about what you're seeing in the aftermath of this particular situation? Well,
absolutely. I think that there's certainly a level of kind of cultural helplessness that we've felt in the aftermath of many mass shootings, which is, on one hand, mass shootings themselves are very traumatizing, and there's a sense that people who are the victims of mass shootings are, people going to movie theaters, kids in schools, things like that. So there's this sense of empathy and helplessness that what could anybody do in a, dark movie theater or school or something like that. And the other level of helplessness is that there are these narratives that filter through our society that because of our division about guns or because of the power of the corporate gun lobby, that there's nothing to be done. And so, you know, the other part of this helplessness is a kind of common sense that this is just going to keep happening because we can't come to any kind of consensus. And I think what we're seeing very importantly in the aftermath of this particular mass shooting in Florida is the emergence of a new kind of grassroots gun violence prevention movement in which people are really, first of all, pushing back on those standard narratives of helplessness led by these amazing high school kids, and also combating this sense that we don't know anything, we can't do anything. So what's great for me as somebody who's studied this for a long time is not just the activism, it's that people really seem to be educating themselves about these questions of gun policy, which I think are very important.
Jonathan, one of the things that I saw last night when I was watching the CNN town hall was that the NRA spokesperson, is that what she is? Dana Loesch, was sitting there talking to the students and to this room full of people, and she consistently kept saying, well, if the mentally ill were kept away from guns, she said crazy, you know, these crazy people come out of you know, and it was like she tried to turn it into like this extreme circumstance. And I think part of the problem is it's really, really hard to keep that narrative that this is an extreme circumstance when people are becoming desensitized to it because it happens so often. But the thing I wanted to ask you as a psychiatrist who's really taken a hard look at the connections between, you know, mental health and violence, and specifically gun violence, how do we talk to people who just say, this only happens because crazy people exist? Because the mentally ill or people with mental health issues basically are around. We will always have to be a little worried about mass shootings.
Well, certainly, let me just say first empathically that I can understand why we turn to the mental illness narrative in the aftermath of mass shootings for a couple of reasons. One, as we see in this case and many others, is that many mass shooters have histories of psychological problems, conduct problems, substance abuse problems, abuse, factors like that. And so it's not like I'm saying, you know, that mental illness isn't important. Certainly, that's certainly the case. And also, just as a nation, as we were just talking about a moment ago, we become traumatized. And I think what happens when you become traumatized is you want to kind of protect yourself and say, here's us, civilized society, and here's them, the crazy people out there. And so in a way, divides this kind of clear line between us and them. There are many, many problems with this narrative. And partially, it's just that the NRA has been pitching this narrative since Sandy Hook. Their idea is basically we don't need a gun registry, we need a national mental illness registry. People like Ann Coulter argued that guns don't kill people, the mentally ill do. And this is repeated again and again and again, and now prominently by Donald Trump. And it's a problem for a couple of reasons. One, I think the Florida shooting is a terrific example. Mental illness is just one of many factors that leads somebody to commit an act like this. And in many cases, mental illness is down the list beneath a bunch of other factors, including how did the person get their gun in the first place, which is something that mental illness story never really lets us talk about. So on one hand, it's a complete diversion. The other is, again, using the Florida case as an example, here's a very troubled young man who has a history of depression, some conduct problems, maybe autism or attention deficit, but that also defines hundreds of thousands of other people in this country. And so there's no way that a psychiatrist like myself could pick out in advance which one of the hundreds of thousands of people who have depression are going to go on to commit an act. And so in that regard, I feel like when everybody says, oh, it's about mental illness, the flip side is, therefore we should institutionalize people, or psychiatrists could pick people out, and that's actually not the case. The real question is, why are there so many guns, and how did this person get their gun? It's a policy question, it's not a mental illness question.
And I agree with that it is a policy question and not a mental illness question.
And I mean, I can give you an example. We know from a public health standpoint, for example, that substance use or alcohol and weapons don't mix very well. It kind of fuels rage. People act in an impulsive way. Many gun suicides are impulsive, and certainly many conflicts are you know, people are drinking at those times and
Oh,
things
yeah.
like that. So you'd think from a public health standpoint that it would not be a great idea to allow weapons in bars, for example. But in the South where I live,
Oh,
you
yeah.
can carry loaded handguns into bars. And so in a way, I feel like that public health frame is very important. It's about you know, really preventing something from happening rather than predicting it.
I think, and I think you're onto something there, absolutely. But one of the things that I hear then is people go, well, that's my right. That's my Second Amendment right, to be able to have my gun whenever, wherever, you know what I mean? Like, that's the right I have. And I wonder if, much like, you know, the First Amendment, if the Second Amendment isn't at times being misrepresented by people when we talk about these gun laws and when we talk about making, you know, common sense gun regulations. People invoke that second right. How do you have those conversations with people who just want to say, hey, Second Amendment rights, so there's nothing we can do?
Well, first of all, it's important to note that there are many people who are responsible gun-owning citizens who don't feel like they adopt the NRA's position that any possible regulation or limitation on gun rights anywhere is an affront to gun rights everywhere. And most gun owners actually aren't NRA members. It's important to keep that in mind. And so if you look at opinion polls, even though we've been led to believe that we're so polarized as a country that we're never going to get along.
Oh no, the opinion polls I've seen have said that, like, no, the majority of people, even gun owners, are totally for more common sense gun regulation.
And so many of us as Americans are, I think, being subject to a very extreme an extreme agenda that's being pushed by a particular corporate lobby. And so in that sense, first of all, I just want to say that there is a Second Amendment right in this country, and many of the policies that are being talked about right now, things like background checks, gun violence, restraining orders, legal age of purchase, all of these factors, none of them are like, we're going to go take everybody's guns away, because nobody's doing that, and nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that.
And so in that sense, I think what we're thinking of is how can we live in a society where there are a lot of weapons? We're kind of unlike many places in that regard. How can we regulate a society that respects people's gun rights on one hand, and on the other hand, creates rules through which we can live? And so in that sense, I feel like we're all, gun owners and people who are worried about guns, we're all being done a really profound disservice by being subject to this extreme agenda that's being pushed by the corporate gun lobby, I think.
Oh my gosh, well, I think you're right. And I think that it's going to take more common sense conversations like these and like the ones that hopefully people are having out there in the world right now. Thank you so much for being here today, Jonathan.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
I love cupcakes and candies, chocolate and jelly beans.
The New York City Housing Authority, or NYCHA, has been in the news a lot this year for all the wrong reasons. As a result, the housing commissioner and the mayor are in the hot seat. But they're among the few feeling the heat, as the boilers in many city housing developments haven't been working. It may feel like winter is over, but we still have a month left, and the storm clouds haven't yet cleared. What does the future hold for NYCHA? We have with us today Council Member Alicka Ampry-Samuel, who is chair of the Public Housing Committee, to tell us about that and other items on her legislative agenda. Woo. Welcome to 112BK.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here. One of the things that we were just talking about before we even got into the interview is the fact that you're new. So much of this is just happening for you. Can you tell me a little bit about what it's like being a new person on the council? What as a city council, what is it like being a new person? Like, how are you feeling day to day? How's it working out? Is there anything unexpected happening?
You know, what's interesting is I still don't know quite how to feel.
Yeah.
Because from the day I started is when the cold season hit. And when they handed me the keys to my office, I walked into the district office and all the pipes burst. And then the very next day is when I started getting calls from the NYCHA residents about no heat and hot water.
Oh, no.
And so it's been a whirlwind, to say the least.
Yeah.
It's a lot of challenges that I was not expecting on day one.
Yeah.
But that's just, we've been, I say that NYCHA and my district in particular is always in a state of emergency in some sense. And the work that has to be done, we have to always think that it's an urgent matter.
Right.
And so it's been a lot over the past few weeks.
Right.
But I'm up for the challenge, and I'm thankful for being in the position to be that voice and do something.
And to actually do something about it.
Yeah,
You know, a lot of
yeah.
people, it's like, it's nice to know that you can do something in a moment, even if you can just get people a little bit closer.
Exactly.
It's not like that's something really rewarding about that.
Exactly.
So talk to us about what's going on with NYCHA. Why have there been so many problems? You know, every once in a while, like I know personally you have to wonder, it's like, were there always this many problems and I'm just now hearing about them, or is something happening in this moment?
Well, I would say that what we see happening is something that has been, it's inevitable because of the lack of funding to the agency on every level, especially the federal government. And so with a car, if you don't maintain your car, if you're not, getting your car serviced and new tires and changing the oil, if you don't have money to fix your car, it's going to one day break down on you, and it could be break down on you on the middle of a highway. So that's what you see happening at NYCHA. If there's no funding going into the building to help with repairs and capital and everything else is going to collapse around you. And it was just a matter of time. And so we see it collapsing around us. But I would say that because of the New York City Council hearings, the public is on notice.
Oh, yeah.
Between the hearings and the media focused so much attention on what's happening with the agency, it feels different.
Well, you
And
guys
that's
just had
big
a rally,
piece of
didn't
it.
you?
We did just have a rally on the steps of City Hall the other day, and it was again to say to New York City Housing Authority, okay, enough is enough. When are we going to see some changes? And not just to NYCHA, but also to the administration, to the mayor, what's happening with the temporary fixes. And last week, we saw the federal government put out their budget, American budget, right? And we saw the cuts on the federal level was some $8.8 billion decrease.
Oh, yeah.
And so, just stand on the steps of City Hall with the residents as well as with Rapper Ja Rule, who lent his voice to say, okay, we are coming together as a collective body to demand attention, to demand action. And you'll see that going forward every week if we have to stand there until we get results.
Wow, wow. I mean, like that just, I'm gonna be real, between Ja Rule and then like you're on the steps and you're trying to get the funding that you need to be able to just make sure people have decent housing. The fact that you have to, like, the idea to me that it makes a difference to have, and I know it does make a difference to have a celebrity there. I know it makes a difference for these people to show up for the neighborhoods that they care about.
Now we need
and
more.
the neighborhoods who, you know what I mean? Like, and I know that you need more.
We need
but
more
it's still a
celebrities
shame.
too.
It's still a shame that you need that. Can you tell me what are some of the changes that you guys are trying to make? Because until you get the funding that you need, it's like you got to work with what you've got.
Absolutely.
So how do you maximize the amount of help you can do when you don't have enough to begin
Well,
with?
there are a lot of changes that are happening already on the management, on the executive level. You see that the new general manager is coming on board this week, Vito Massachulo from HPD. But what I've just recently proposed was when I was working at NYCHA, I saw that there was a missing voice at the table on the executive level, and that voice was from the actual residents. I'm a former NYCHA resident, but at the same time, I don't live in NYCHA today. But I think it's imperative to have that voice at the table. And so the same way you'll have a chief financial officer or a chief technology officer, chief operating officer, there should be a chief resident officer, someone that currently lives in the NYCHA developments, but have that skill set, have that executive mindset to know what's happening, where there can be some disconnect, and be able to bring that voice of the people beyond the management level on the development level, but into 250 Broadway on the 12th floor. And so I think if you have that voice of reason at the table during senior staff, that could make all the difference as well.
Absolutely. I can see how that would be true. I know one of the things that you guys are working on and that you've been talking about are these 2 detention centers in Brownsville. And sort of trying to take those from being less of detention centers and more like education centers for people who need a little bit more assistance.
Okay, doing your homework
So,
on the 41st Council District.
Well, I mean,
yeah,
talk to me about that.
So right now there's a lot of conversations around the closure of Rikers Island, as well as the raise the age, where 16 and 17-year-olds should not be housed with the older population. They should not be housed at Rikers Island, and they should be placed in juvenile detention centers.
Right.
So in my district, along with 26 public housing developments, I also have Crossroads Detention Center. One of the 2 city facilities is Horizon in the Bronx, and there's Crossroads in my district. And we also have Ella McQueen, which is a juvenile detention center that's on a state level. And so when they have a mandate to have the 16 and 17-year-olds off of Rikers by October of this year. And so they will be housed at Crossroads, and they're looking to possibly house the others at Ella McQueen.
Wow.
And so we want to make sure that those young people have the resources and services that they need, and that is decreasing the level of beds in the facilities and increasing the number of educational classrooms and opportunities to learn a skill. So when they are released to their families, the families have what they need to be able to like wrap around services and everything else, and those young people can go into the workforce, vocational programs, and get the education that they need so that they don't wind up back in the system.
Right.
So that's a huge focus in my district, in addition to public housing.
Good. So first of all, it just sounds like you're real busy. So busy. And I wish you the best of luck with everything that you have going on moving forward. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Until next time.
Until next time.
Because you're going to come back.
Yes.
We have more to talk about.
Yes.
We have a lot more to talk about. We're coming to the end of Black History Month, and what better way to commemorate than with art? The Myrtle Avenue Brooklyn Partnership has been hosting their 6th annual Black Artstory Month, themed Sankofa. Go back and get it. With art forms ranging from the visual arts to poetry to theater to storytelling. And the best part? It's all free. Here to tell us more are Jennifer Stokes from the Myrtle Avenue Brooklyn Partnership. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And Thomas Piper, a performance artist. Welcome to 112BK.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So can you just tell me, first of all, Jennifer, about Artstory Month? Like, how did this happen? When did it start?
It's a little bit of what you said earlier. It started 6 years ago, and it actually came out of a staff meeting. We were sitting there, and our current executive director, Meredith Phillips Almeida, she said, you know what? I want to do something during Black History Month, and I want to pay homage to the many artists in the neighborhood. And so there began, right at the staff meeting, Black Art Story. Wow. And so we've been doing it since 2013, so yes, for 6 years, and really excited about it. I'll just go on a little bit more. I was going to say it's very much anchored by visual art, because we always have an art walk, you know, where we match business owners up with artists, and you see art along Myrtle Avenue, our wonderful 20-block stretch of Myrtle Avenue in Fort Greene and Clinton Hill, Brooklyn. And then then every Friday, it has changed certainly throughout the years, but for the most part, one of the things that works for us as well is to then every Friday to have more like, you know, performance art or literary art at businesses, as small businesses along Myrtle as well. So it's very much an exciting exciting time, that marriage between different local organizations and wonderful artists like Thomas that come out and do and perform. So we're excited about it.
Thomas, tell me about some of your work that we're going to be able to see at the Artwalk.
Okay, well, I'm a part of an event called Currency. So basically what I'm going to be doing is there's going to be a discussion, and I'm going to be inspired by the discussion, listening in on the discussion, and I'm a musician. I'm an artist as well, but I'm a musician, so I'm going to be creating music off of the discussion.
Wow.
I do a weekly show on YouTube called Beat Design, so I do a lot of electronic improv and singing and vocal looping and making songs on the fly. So this is like a perfect thing where I'm going to hopefully take pieces from the discussion and create a song or some sort of piece musically from that.
That sounds amazing. And Jennifer, can you tell me, what is Sankofa? What does it mean? Why is it the theme this year?
Sure. Sankofa, every year we have a curator. We select a curator, and that curator then sets the theme for the year's Black Art Story. This year's theme was set by artist Ramona Candy. I was about to say visual artist, but she does so much in the arts. But by visual and performance artist Ramona Candy. And so once that theme is set, then it means that all of the artwork that's in the windows, all of the performance and literary arts in the businesses on Fridays, it means that it is speaking out of that theme. So when Thomas talked about currency, it's certainly looking back at the current system and looking at what it was built upon, and just sort of envisioning other ways currently to look at, like, how do we look at it more sustainably? How do we look at it more humanely? And so those are some of the things. I feel like I would be remiss without speaking about some of the partners that we have. And here I am sitting in BRIC, and BRIC is one of our partners. It was part of our kickoff event with University Settlement, New York City's very first intergenerational community arts council, with lots of different players who came to the Ingersoll Community Center. And so BRIC was very much a very large part of that, along with Jessica Sutra, as well as Allison Flemminger. So I do want to give a nod there. Also, we have Suhaili Bautista Carolina and Willow Books. That was our literary Friday, which was very much looking at artists like, Claude McKay, just so many, Gwendolyn Brooks, and looking at authors such as that. And then those poets or spoken word artists then, read their own work, but also read the work that they were inspired by. Ramona Candy herself on a Friday had her wonderful art, and then of course Jack this coming Friday.
It sounds amazing. How do people come see it?
Well, for my thing, it's going to be at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, Building 92, 7 p.m. to 9:30. So you can RSVP at Eventbrite, I think, as well.
7 to 9:30 when?
Friday.
Friday.
Yep,
Friday.
And
how? And so if people want to come to the Art Walk, can they just come through? Do they just show up?
They can definitely come through. The Building 92 at the Brooklyn Navy Yard is one of our larger venues, but I would say for the most part, if they should take a look at our website, Myrtle Avenue, all spelled out, myrtleavenue.org or myrtleavenue.org, and we have our full schedule there, as well as Eventbrite. They can sign up that way as well.
Fantastic.
Yes, thank you.
Fantastic. I love that. Thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Can't wait to have you back next year to talk about Art Walk number 7. It's going to be fantastic. Have a good one.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. We'll be back next week with a look back at Trayvon Martin and the movement his life inspired on the anniversary of his death, hacktivists in the government's crosshairs, and a special episode on the city's transit system. I hope you can join us.